The question is that plagiarism? So here we are for another episode that I find really interesting, which is our AI-powered education program. And this week we have a question that we want to really dig into. And here I have co-host Casey Wacker in the high school classroom, and I am Sandra Weiser-Matthews in the college setting. And we've just come together to really talk about AI and education and just working and making sure that we help educators really reach out to their learners when it comes to figuring out this AI that is really changing things. Now, we both know that it's been around for a long time, but education kind of is a little slower with keeping up. And I think this is part of our discovery is like, we are kind of behind the scene and behind the pace of everything, and we better catch up. So that's why we're here, and we're going to share our message. So our question for today is to dig into why people are so concerned about plagiarism with AI if it is intellectual, if it is not intellectual property. So you'll hear all the time, and I know you just went to a conference talking about AI as, you know, like plagiarism, and all the teachers and administrators and college people are worried about it. But is that really true? Is that really what's going on? So why don't you talk a little bit about what you've discovered about this whole plagiarism issue, maybe as from the past, as well as also into like, is it really plagiarism?
Well, Sandra, I love that we are having this conversation. It's so relevant to me in the high school classroom, and I imagine it is to you in the college setting as well. This last weekend, I was fortunate enough to attend this communications conference. It brings together people who are in speech, debate, one act, as well as communication instructors on a college campus, concurrent enrollment instructors like myself. And it brings together like-minded people who have this same concern about AI, about plagiarism. I feel like our conversation's been the same this entire time, where we've been trying to get over this hurdle of people's fear and apprehension of plagiarism using AI. And it just became so apparent to all of us educators in the room that we're using the wrong language. So we changed our syllabi. We adapted this new perspective to say, listen, we want to use AI in our rooms. We do, because we see the value. We've had episodes where we've talked about the value of it, but now we've had our conversation go, well, how do we say it's acceptable to use it, but not under certain circumstances? So we've used the word plagiarism. We said, well, when you simply copy and paste all of that information and claim it as your own, now we've got plagiarism. Well, but technically speaking,
I'm going to ask you a question. So maybe that's what you're going to set up. But so if you're giving the prompt and you're telling the AI tool, I want this parameter, I want this, and you've given it all the structure, how is it plagiarism?
Right. And that's part of this conversation, to say plagiarism isn't the right term to use for what's happening here. Now, copy and paste, right? That's our terminology. It's not that simple in AI situations like ChatGPT, where you are prompting it. You are giving it the information to sort of give you something in response. And so intellectual property law is supposedly, and I'm not going to quote the law, I'm not going to be an expert here, but I'm going to say this is the conversation we had when we hear from, IP lawyers who handle cases of intellectual property. They would argue that OpenAI is not a human, therefore it is not entitled to intellectual property law. It cannot be protected in that way. So for us as educators to claim that the content on there, when copy and pasted, is plagiarism is false, right? And I know that's so hard to grasp because no, copy and paste, they're copy and paste. We get that way. But to be honest with you, when we are concerned about a student who is taking the work of a computer generated model and claiming it to be their own and saying, I didn't use AI, and they're not taking that ownership for it, that's unethical, right? That is a breach of our ethical moral code. That's what it is. And that's where our syllabi and the language we use when we talk to administrators, the language that we use when we talk to IT people who kind of control our access to these tools, that's the sort of conversation we need to have. And then again, comes back into our classrooms where we say, what is ethical behavior? How are we ethical communicators and ethical consumers of this? And realizing that the terminology we use to define this is actually very important to how we're preparing students to communicate in the future and when they are using these tools in their jobs, in their work settings. So yeah.
I would say too, it does go to the planning of the educator as well. Are you just sending them out with some assignment that they're going to do at home without you guiding and talking about what is ethical communication, embedding that in your lessons, working like even the structure of what you're saying, go out for the assignments to do. Are you setting learners up so that they wind up in these boxes where they are somewhat alone trying to do these assignments, and then they turn to the AI, and then again, it's like, well, you were supposed to do this all on your own. Well, is that really the way we should plan all the time as educators, right? So again, it goes to the planning of the whole process. And that does go back to us, the professional in the classroom. Like you said, are we really sharing with our learners what that ethical communication responsibility is?
Right. And when you are instructing your students, because your students they're our future of education, they're our future teachers, and you're encouraging them to use tools like ChatGPT and Bard and Bing and having all of these or Microsoft's, like you're wanting them to like branch out and use these things. But it's good for them to start having these conversations. So when you do that, like, how do you feel your students are responding to using the AI themselves as users and then teaching others to use it? Like, are they comfortable with this? Do they understand the differences between that language of plagiarism and unethical behavior?
Right. And then also, I know that we work really hard in the classroom to help our learners become more of the creator themselves. So again, that whole conversation too of like, how does that feel when a creator's material is taken? Because that's the other part of that, whose material is it as well, or pieces of it, or again, just all of that conversation. But again, as educators, we're the ones that need to structure that and work with our learners and see what they come up with too, because many of them are creators and they don't want their stuff taken without being compensated for it as well. But it is, and you're right. When we do struggle, we come up with these cool ideas as teachers, and we want to like share them and get going. And then all of a sudden, our IT department like says, wait a second, do you know all the ramifications here? And let's kind of put some holds on this. And then now we have to go in and try to make sure that we are educating and helping them feel safe that what we are doing in our classroom is also ethical and reasonable, right?
Right.
So do you have any suggestions or comments on how you've approached that, or is that another topic?
Well, I think it certainly is another topic for us, because I think that we have to be prepared to have conversations, not just with our students and their ethical use, but to defend our use of it. That's kind of what you're saying here, is that, the IT departments that we work with in education, they have a lot of responsibility to make sure that our minors in a high school setting, especially, or even sometimes in that college setting too, that you protect what is yours, and you can't fault them for that. But what we do need to recognize is that as educators and wanting to help our students learn something that we know is going to be useful to them in the future, we have to take on some of that ownership too, to say, I need to explain to you the value that I have here, and the students will gain from this, so that they're a little bit more open and understanding to why something that might sound kind of scary really is a tool that students should be using.
And often, I'm not sure how often we have invited those IT at the table with us, with our learners and us in that conversation of what we'd like to do, and let them become a partner. And I know that over the years, when different schools were starting one-to-one programs, they often had IT at the table, and I don't think we have them there anymore. So it might be a great place for us to think about.
Well, we often don't think about putting them in the room when we have curriculum planning, but AI is now becoming a significant tool in our curriculum planning. And so, yeah, like you said, let's invite them to sit at the table with us and have a conversation. I think that's where everything always starts, right? Invite them to have a conversation.
That's right. Just like what you said about talking to your learners about what is ethical, what's responsibility. Let's be a team together. So with that, I guess that is our time for this episode. Thank you, but it's always important to talk about AI-powered education and unleash that power for all. Thank you.
Thank you.